إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد. So today we proceed with the explanation of usool Sunnah of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala, where he has gathered the ijma' or the consensus of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah of his time and those who preceded him from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, from the Tabi'een, the Atba'u Tabi'een, and the Imams of the generation that came before him. And he is, of course, the Imam of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah of his age. And he is from the greatest of the great scholars that have appeared after the time of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. So in this point that we begin today from usool Sunnah of Imam Ahmad, and remember that this is predicated upon the fact that he began by saying that the foundations of the Sunnah with us are, meaning that the fundamentals of the Aqidah and the methodology of the people of Sunnah, Firqatul Najiyah, Ta'ifatul Mansura, Ahlul Hadith, the Salafiyun, this is what they are upon from the time of the Sahaba up until Yawm al-Qiyamah. That the foundations of the Sunnah with us, that from them, as he has said here, وَالسَّمْعُ وَطَاعَةُ لِلْأَئِمَّةِ وَأَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْبَرِّ وَالْفَاجِرِ ومن ولي الخلافة واجتمع الناس عليه وردوا به ومن غلبهم أو عليهم بالسيف حتى صار خليفة وسمي أمير المؤمنين وغزو ماض مع الأمراء إلى يوم القيامة البر والفاجر لا يترك. That he said in this point here that from our belief, from our aqeedah, from our creed is to hear and to obey the rulers and the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the faithful, whether he is righteous or whether he is a sinner. And whomsoever attains the khilafah, the caliphate, and the people have gathered with him, and they are pleased with him. And even the one who conquers them with the sword, overpowers them with the sword, up until he becomes their ruler, their khalifa. And he is given the title Amir al-Mu'mineen, that he is to be obeyed, he is to be listened to, and he is to be obeyed. وَالْغَزْوُ مَادٍ, that joining the battles with the rulers remains up until Yawm al-Qiyamah, up until the day of resurrection, whether he is pious or a sinner, and it is not to be abandoned. So this point here, or these points here, my brothers and sisters, that's the end of the speech of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. But this point here is connected to the methodology and the belief and the creed of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah as it relates to the rulers and obedience to the rulers, regardless of whether they are righteous or whether they are sinful, and how the rulership amongst the Muslims, regardless of how it is attained, that it is something that is still considered to be applicable to the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Why? Because Imam Ahmed here mentions the issue of, right at the very beginning, وَالسَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ لِلْأَئِمَّةِ وَأَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, to hear and to obey the rulers, meaning the Muslim rulers, and the Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the leader of the faithful, whether he is righteous or whether he is a sinner, meaning that it is possible for the Amir al-Mu'mineen, it is possible for the leader of the believers over the Muslims to be either righteous or a fajir, a sinner, a sinful man. So the leader of the Muslims or the leader of the believers, Amir al-Mu'mineen, can be sinful. And this is the point that he makes here. وَأَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْبَرِّ وَالْفَاجِرِ وَمَنْ وَلِيَ الْخِلَافَةِ, and whomsoever attains the khilafah, the leadership, and the people have gathered with him and they are pleased with him. وَمَنْ غَلَبَهُمْ, and even for the one who conquers them bisayf, with the sword, up until, meaning that he fights them and he conquers the people using the sword, and he becomes the caliph, and he is given the title Amir al-Mu'mineen, then he is to be heard, he is to be listened to, and he is to be obeyed. Rather, وَالْغَزْوُ مَادٍ مَا الْأُمَرَاءِ, rather joining the battles with the rulers, that it remains and it is constant, meaning that it is something that is not negated up until the day of resurrection, whether the ruler is a fajir, whether he is bar or wal fajir, meaning that whether he is righteous or whether he is a sinner, it is not to be abandoned. Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi rahimahullah, he said that Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal here, that he clarified that it is obligatory upon every Muslim to hear and to obey the one whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in charge of the affairs of the Muslims. And that is regardless of the fact that this ruler over the Muslims, whether he is pious or whether he is wicked and evil. And this is due to the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hear and obey, even if the one appointed over you is an Abyssinian slave who is maimed and disabled, or the one who is an Abyssinian slave who is maimed with limbs amputated. The hadith reported by Imam Muslim in his Sahih. And in a riwayah, كَأَنَّ رَأْسُهُ زَبِيبَةٌ. In a narration here, and obey the ruler, the one who is placed in charge of your affairs, even if his head is shaped like a raisin. He's an Abyssinian slave with a head shaped like a raisin. You are still to obey him, regardless of his background, regardless of his disfigurement, regardless of what you think, regardless of how you feel. He is your ruler, the one appointed over you, then you are to hear and to obey him. And that hadith, even if his head is shaped like a raisin, reported by Imam al-Bukhari in his Sahih. And the hadith in this subject matter are numerous, so one should refer to them in their source references, such as the books of hadith and the authorships in the Islamic creed. And we'll come back to that inshallah later, bi-idhnillah. Then Imam Ahmed, he said, وَالْغَزْوُ مَادٍ مَا الْأُمَرَاءِ, that joining the battles with the rulers remains up until the day of resurrection, whether he is pious or a sinner. It is not to be abandoned. Fighting alongside the ruler, Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi, he said, rahimahullah, fighting alongside the ruler, the one in charge of the nation, and praying the Jumu'ah and the Eid prayers behind him, all of this is obligatory upon whoever is under his rule, meaning under his rule in his land. So if you live in a land where there is a Muslim ruler, then you are to pray behind him. The Jumu'ah and the Jama'ah, if he leads the prayer, you pray behind him. The Eid prayers, you pray behind him. And you pray behind those who he has appointed for you to pray behind. All of this is obligatory if you live in his land. And they are to join him in battle against the unbelievers if he calls them, and to fight against the rebellious ones, to fight against the bughat, the rebels, just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded in his saying, فَإِن بَغَتْ إِهْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى نَفِيعَ إِلَىٰ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ حَتَّى تَفِيعَ إِلَىٰ أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. But if one of the groups rebels against the other, then all of you fight against the rebels until they comply with the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surah Al-Hujurat, ayah number 9. And whoever rebels against the ruler, Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi said, and whomsoever rebels against the ruler who is followed by the people, the one that they have had to yield to, and they have submitted to his leadership and to the leadership of the Muslims, regardless of whether he attained leadership through consultation, through a consultative body, or whether it was through conquering them, regardless, obedience to him is an obligation, as well as fighting under his banner. If he calls you to fight against the unbelievers or against the rebels, against those who are causing mischief and corruption in the land, and he calls the people to stand behind him to fight against the rebellious ones and to fight against the enemies, against the unbelievers, then one is obligated to come under his banner, regardless of whether he is righteous or whether he is a sinner. And whomsoever falls short in that regard, then he is responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he is one who has abandoned an obligation. In this regard, Ibn Hibban reported in his Sahih, also Ibn Abi Asim in a Sunnah, and declared Sahih by Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, from Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu anhu, that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Hear and obey the ruler in times when it is difficult for you, and in times when it is easy for you, in times when you are pleased and in times when you dislike it, and when others are given preferential treatment over you, and even if they take your wealth and they beat your back, do not disobey them, or rather, do not disobey them, but do not obey them if it involves disobedience to Allah." So this hadith from the narration of Ubadah ibn Samit makes it clear that the rulers are to be heard and to be obeyed, even if others are given preferential treatment over you. But if the ruler commands you with disobedience to Allah, then do not obey that ruler in that issue when he asks you to disobey Allah. Meaning that when he commands you to obey Allah, or when he commands you with something that does not involve disobedience to Allah, then you are to obey him. But if it involves disobedience to Allah, then you are not to obey him, but rather cling to that which you are commanded to obey him in. Imam Muslim reports in his Sahih from Wa'il ibn Hujr that Salma bin Yazid al-Ju'fi asked Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, "O Prophet of Allah, what do we do if we have rulers over us who demand their rights, yet they withhold our rights?" The Prophet ﷺ replied, "Listen to them and obey them. Upon them is their burden, and upon you is your burden." In another narration, collected by Ibn Abi Asim in a Sunnah from Adi bin Hatim, that we said, "O Allah's Messenger, we do not ask you regarding obedience to the ruler who has taqwa, who fears Allah, who is good and he rectifies. Rather, we are asking you about the ruler who does such and such and such and such. And they mentioned the evil traits of those rulers. So the Prophet ﷺ responded to them, fear Allah, listen to the ruler and obey him. This narration authenticated by Al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala. So both of these narrations, the narration from Ibn Hibban and from Ubadah ibn Samit, collected by Ibn Hibban, that you are to obey the Muslim ruler, even if others are given preferential treatment, something that you deserve, the ruler takes it from you and gives it to someone else. Even if he takes your wealth and beats you in your back. But do not obey them if it involves disobedience to Allah. So you have been commanded, my brothers and sisters, to have sabr with the rulers. To have sabr with the rulers. Because they will carry their burden and you will carry your burden. Likewise, there occurs in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, whoever sees, the hadith reported by Bukhari and Muslim, whoever sees from his ruler something that he dislikes, then let him be patient. Let him be patient with the ruler. Because whomsoever separates from the jama'ah, meaning the united body of the Muslims in that country, even by a handspan, and then he dies in that condition, he will die the death of Jahiliyyah. And that was narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, and it is muttafaqun alayh. It is agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. So meaning that even if the rulers do things that you hate, you dislike, you despise, you find it hard and you find it difficult, that you are to hear and you are to obey. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated in a hadith collected by Imām Muslim in his Sahih, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, upon you is to hear and to obey the Muslim ruler in times of ease, in times of hardship, whether you are pleased, whether you are displeased, and even when others are given preference over you. Meaning while you are more deserving, others are given preference by the ruler. Because the affair of the ruler, my brothers and sisters, is immense. Because by disobeying the Muslim ruler and by causing, because of his wickedness, because of his sins, that you are now a person who rebels or rises up against the Muslim ruler, that you will be a cause of bloodshed. Sheikhul Islam ibn Taymiyyah stated in Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 28, page 179. He said, rahimahullah, being patient with the tyranny of the rulers is a fundamental principle and asl from the usool of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. This is not an affair where differing is tolerated, regardless of what the Khawarij they say, and regardless of what gharaib and what weak opinions they bring. That such and such happened in history, and such said something, and such someone, so and so said something else. All of that becomes irrelevant in the face of all of these ahadith which are authentic upon Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So remember that statement, being patient with the tyranny of the rulers is an asal, is a fundamental principle from the fundamentals of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Then Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he mentions the next point. وَقِسْمَةُ الْفَيْءِ وَإِقَامَةُ الْحُدُودِ إِلَى الْأَئِمَّةِ مَاضٍ لَيْسَ لِأَحَدٍ أَنْ يَطْعَنَ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يُنَازِعَهُمْ. He said, and likewise, leaving the division of the spoils of war and the establishment of the hudud, the prescribed punishments to the rulers remains. It is something that is madin, it remains constantly up until the Day of Judgment. It is not allowed for anyone to attack them or revile them and nor to contend with them. Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi, he said that I say, in this portion here, Imam Ahmed clarifies, explains the rights of the rulers, that the division of the spoils of war after battle is left to the rulers, and the establishment of the hudud is left to the rulers. It is not allowed for anyone to take that right away from them. These are their rights. And likewise, the aiding of the oppressed and to put an end to disputes and so on, these are the rights of the rulers. So the rulers, my brothers and sisters, they have rights. If they are righteous, alhamdulillah, that is good for them. And if they are wicked and impious, and they are sinful, and they are oppressive, and they are tyrannical, that does not remove the obligation of hearing them and obeying them and following them in battle against the unbelievers and against the rebellious. And that's why that statement of Shaykh al-Islam that we quoted earlier is so important. Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 28, being patient with the tyranny of the rulers. So he's mentioning the tyranny, the oppression of the rulers is a fundamental, it is an asl, meaning that it is from our aqeedah. It is not something that is open to dispute and something to argumentation. Those who argue with this, then they are the Mu'tazila and the Khawarij. And of this time, then they are the people of takfir, the takfiriyun. And other than them from the offshoots or from those who have branched off from Al-Ikhwan al-Muflisin. This is the manhaj of Al-Ikhwan. They founded Sayyid Qutb, or their guide and their scholar Sayyid Qutb, their founder Hassan al-Banna. This is their ideology, who oppose this aqeedah and oppose all of these narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, Bukhari and Muslim, agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim, and other narrations. Ibn Hibban in his Sahih, Ibn Abi Asim in his Sunnah, and other than them, At-Tabarani in Al-Kabir. Most of these narrations authenticated by the great scholars of Hadith and Sunnah, the likes of Bukhari and Muslim. Many of these narrations collected by Ibn Majah, Abu Dawood. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala stated in Minhaj al-Sunnah al-Nabawiyya, volume 3, 231. He said, they have not been a people who revolted against their ruler, except that their condition after their rebellion was worse than it was before they rebelled. Because the end result of rebellion and disobeying the ruler is that their condition becomes worse. It does not become better. It does not become better. In a narration, Al-Hasan narrated saying that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned the rulers, and he mentioned the evil rulers sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He mentioned the leaders, and he mentioned the evil leaders. Then he sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to them that the misguidance of some of them will fill what is between the sky and the earth. So they said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, should we not strike them with the sword? So he said, no, so long as they pray, or so long as they pray the prayer, then no. Reported by Nu'aym bin Hammad in Kitab al-Fitan, number 400, narration number 491, volume 1, page 185. So all of these narrations that they show us, as Shaykh Rabi has mentioned in his explanation of usool al-Sunnah, that even if they fill, that their misguidance of some of them will fill what is between the sky and the earth, still rebellion is not allowed against them, so long as they establish the prayer. So long as they establish the prayer. Shaykh Rabi said, so imagine how many sins and evil that they commit, yet the Prophet ﷺ commanded them with patience and to make sure that they are praying. So long as they are praying and establishing the prayer, then they are not to be rebelled against. Then Imam Ahmed, he said, rahimahullah, in the next point, وَدَفْعُ الصَّدَقَاتِ إِلَيْهِمْ جَائِزَةٌ نَافِذَةٌ مَنْ دَفَعَهَا إِلَيْهِمْ أَجْزَأَتْ عَنْهُ بَرًّا كَانَ أَوْ فَاجِرًا. And then he said, Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, and handing the zakah to the rulers is permissible and is a constant allowance. And whoever gives them his zakah has fulfilled his obligation regardless of whether the ruler is righteous or a sinner. Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi rahimahullah stated in his explanation, and from the rights of the rulers is collecting the zakah. And that is their right. And it is not permitted to give it to other than him. Meaning it is not permitted to give it to other than the ruler if the ruler demands it. And whomsoever gives it to someone other than the ruler, or to whoever the ruler has appointed, he must atone for it, meaning that he must make up for it, he must make qada of that. And that is because, as some of the scholars they have stated, from them Shaykh Rabi', because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, that he fought against those who withheld paying him the zakah. He sent out collectors to collect the zakah and they refused, so he fought against them. So if the ruler demands the zakah is to be paid to him, whether he is righteous or whether he is a sinner, then it must be paid to him. And one cannot withhold the zakah from him under the guise that he is a sinner, or that he is tyrannical, or that he is an oppressor, or that he is a transgressor. The ruler, if he demands the zakah, then the zakah is paid to him. And whomsoever has given him the zakah, then that is accepted from him. Barran kana aw fajiran, even if the ruler, regardless of whether the ruler is pious or a sinner. So if he demands that the zakah is to be paid to him, then it must be paid to him. If he gives you the option, then the option is open to you. Then Imam Ahmed, he said, وَصَلَاةُ الْجُمْعَةِ خلف من والله جائزة نافذة تامة ركعتين من عادهما فهو مبتدع تارك للآثار مخالف لسنتي ليس له من فضل الجمعة شيء إذا لم يرى الصلاة خلف الأئمة من كان برهم أو فاجرهم فالسنة بأن يصلي معهم ركعتين ويدين بأنها تامة لا يكن في صدرك من ذلك شك. Then he said, Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, and the Jumu'ah prayer behind the ruler remains, and likewise behind whomsoever he has appointed is allowed, and it is something that remains constant, and it is something that is considered to be complete and consists of 2 rak'ahs. And whomsoever repeats the prayer, meaning the Jumu'ah prayer, after he has prayed it behind the Imam and he repeats it, then he is an innovator, one who has abandoned the narrations, and he is an opposer of the Sunnah. He receives nothing from the excellence of Jumu'ah if he does not hold that the prayer behind the rulers is allowed, whether they are righteous or sinners. So the Sunnah is to pray 2 rak'ahs with them and to believe it to be fulfilled by praying behind them, without having any doubt regarding that in your heart. End of the speech of Imam Ahmed. The meaning here is that the Salatul Jumu'ah behind the Muslim rulers and likewise the Jama'ah pray behind them, and likewise the Eid pray behind them, and behind those whom they have appointed as Imams of the Masajid. All of that is obligatory to be performed alongside the Imam. So this is another indication, my brothers and sisters, of how the Salaf were. This is Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, meaning that the sinfulness of the Muslim ruler and his tyranny. And you've heard examples of the tyranny of the Muslim rulers, that they take your rights, as in that hadith that we stated, the ruler who demands his rights, but he does not give you your rights. The ruler who gives preference to others whilst you are deserving it. The rulers who fill that which is between the sky and the earth with misguidance. The rulers who beat you in your back. The rulers who take your wealth. If those very same rulers now lead you in prayer, you are to follow them in the prayer. If those rulers call you to come out and perform jihad in the cause of Allah against the unbelievers, then you obey them in that call. The rulers, as those companions, when they said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would you not ask you about the ruler who has taqwa? Would you not ask you about the ruler who is good? Would you not ask you about the ruler who rectifies? Rather, we are asking about the rulers who do such and such and such and such evil. Those rulers, when they divide the spoils of war, they are not to be left to you, they are to be given to the ruler. Those of the rulers, if they demand that the zakah is to be paid to them, then you give them the zakah. Those of the rulers who, when they lead you in prayer, you follow them and you do not repeat the prayer. Those are the rulers, when they establish the Jummah prayer, you pray behind them and behind those whom they appoint. Those are the rulers, when they appoint the mu'adhin to call the adhan, you answer the adhan. So the wickedness of the ruler and his tyranny does not remove the obligation of obeying him. Such that Imam Ahmad said that whomsoever repeats the prayer after having prayed behind him, behind that sinful, tyrannical, oppressive, misguided ruler, whomsoever repeats the prayer, then he is a mubtadi'. He is an innovator. Why? Because by splitting away from the Muslim ruler and splitting from the Jama'ah, even by a handspan, then he dies, he will die the death of Jahiliyyah. What is the death of Jahiliyyah? The death of Jahiliyyah is the death of disunity, the death of not having direction, not having a united body, that causes splits and separation within the community of the Muslims and the Muslim Ummah, that they have no fixed ruler who leads them and unites them and protects them when they are united behind him, when he calls them out to fight. So if you dislike something from the ruler, then be patient, because whomsoever separates from him and his Jama'ah, because he is the head of the Jama'ah here referring to the Muslims who live under him in that Muslim land, even if he gained authority by conquering the people with his sword, even if he gained authority in that manner, as Imam Ahmad said, we want to talk about following the Salaf. This is the Salaf. And it is an asl from the usool of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So those mubtadi'ah and the innovators who come along and they say there is a difference of opinion in this issue, and they bring a qawl that is ghareeb from this one, a strange saying from this one, or a strange saying from that one, even if they are scholars, does not remove the fact that this is something that the Prophet ﷺ commanded the Sahaba, and no one's word from any of the people, no matter how righteous they are, takes precedence over the wahi that was sent to Muhammad ﷺ. So a person cannot come along and claim, oh, but such and such a sheikh from such and such a century, he rebelled. His rebellion does not take precedence over the words of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hadith after hadith after hadith, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade all of that, such that the books of Aqidah were filled with the command not to rebel against the Muslim ruler. Regardless of what level his tyranny reaches, so long as he prays, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, So long as he establishes the prayer, he is to be obeyed, because breaking away from him, splitting away from them, and then dying in that state, if someone dies, he dies the death of Jahiliyyah. Just like those Arabs in the time of pre-Islamic ignorance, that they had no leadership over them, that they were separated, divided, hateful of each other, fighting each other for decades and years, having no unity among them. That is the death of Jahiliyyah, meaning that he dies with the traits of the people of Jahiliyyah. And whomsoever claims, Shaykh Ahmed al-Najmi said, and whomsoever claims that the Jumu'ah prayer is not correct behind the Imam who is present, that it is only correct behind the infallible Imam, by an Imam who they consider to be infallible from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as is known from the Shia, that this is their belief. And whomsoever follows them, then such a person is counted to be among those who are astray. And Ibn Abil Izz al-Hanafi rahimahullah ta'ala stated in his sharh of the Aqidah al-Tahawiyah, page 556, that the Rafidah are the most lost of the people in them being deprived of goodness and in this issue, because they made the Imam who is infallible the Imam who is absent, who cannot benefit them in the deen nor in the dunya. And it is not permitted to follow such a person in that false belief. And one should not be in any doubt concerning the correctness of his 2 rak'ahs that he prays of Jum'ah behind the Imam. And this is the view that is held by Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So the Salafi should not debate with Ahlul Bidah over this issue. Here's the hadith of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Here are the statements of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam regarding the most wicked of rulers. Here is the statement of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and the A'immah of the Salaf. From them, Abu Zur'a al-Razi, Abu Hatim al-Razi, as they stated, the ijma' of the great scholars of their era and those who came before them. Abu Hatim died in 277. Abu Zur'a died in 264. That they said, and we hold that it is not permissible to rebel against the rulers. And upon this the ijma' was established, regardless of those who differed. Because anyone who differs with the ijma' is considered to have differed with the text. And the text in this issue, the nas, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu a'tiyu Allah wa a'tiyu Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. O you who believe, obey Allah and His Messenger and those in authority over you. Nas. Clear ayah from the book of Allah. Hadith that I've mentioned, Bukhari, Muslim, Ibn Abi As, Sunnah of Ibn Abi Asim, Al-Sharia of Al-Ajurri, the books of Sunnah, clear and established. The Prophet ﷺ forbade rebelling against them. Rather, he commanded in times of ease, in times of hardship, when you are pleased, when you are displeased. It doesn't matter whether it is bitter or whether it is sweet. You are to obey the ruler whether he is tyrannical or whether he is pious, so long as he prays. And if he commands you with any affair in disobedience to Allah, then you say to him, in that I will not obey you. Call me to obedience in that which does not involve disobedience to Allah. So call me to something that will not displease Allah, and I am behind you. As for that which you have commanded me with, in disobedience to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in that I will not obey you. But I will not raise the sword against you, and I will not fight you. I will not rouse the people against you or rile the people against you. Rather, I will obey you, and if you lead me in prayer, I will follow you in prayer. This is the belief of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. This is the position of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. How many of the people follow these ahadith and they say that we are Sunni? Just like those now who are celebrating the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ, we are Sunni. They are not Sunni. They are not from the people of Sunnah. They are not Ahlus Sunnah, because Ahlus Sunnah never celebrated the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. Ahlus Sunnah, amongst the Ahlus Sunnah, who were the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the Atba'u Tabi'een, Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafi'i and Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Bukhari and Muslim and Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, Ibn Abi Shaybah. None of them celebrated the birthday of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a bid'ah of the Rafida. This is a bid'ah of the Shia. Yet they will claim that they are people of Sunnah. They are not people of Sunnah. They are people of bid'ah and superstition and invention and distortion of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like these Khawarij who rise up against the Muslim rulers, making qiyas that is whispered to them from shaitan, that they will reject hundreds of ahadith of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam to justify their rebellion against the Muslim rulers because they are followers of hawa. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from their misguidance and protect our communities from the evil and destructive ideologies of the Mu'tazila and the Khawarij of every age and era. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala